Hi, this is Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I'm in Holbrook here in New South Wales. The shell of the submarine is behind me. You may not be able to see it very well, but I thought I would do a video from here. It's actually inspired by this. This is actually from Lone Pine in Turkey. You might say, how on earth did you get that from Lone Pine in Turkey? Well, I went to a shrine in Canberra, which was produced by Legacy, giving the tribute to the mothers and children that lost their husbands in war. I think it was something like 130,000 women who ended up single mothers because their partners had been killed in warfare. And they planted a tree which was taken from a seed of a tree in Lone Pine in Turkey, so in Gallipoli. And this is actually the actual plant that's come from Turkey. Now, the HMAS Holbrook is about sinking a Turkish, I believe, submarine. In respect of that war, I'd have to look over the exhibition again and read it properly. But the purpose of this video is really not to go into the history of military. It's inspired by this seed. I want to actually go still for a little bit on this particular seed, which has come from Lone Pine. Sorry that the video is moving around a bit. I kind of feel to bring it up closer so you can have a look. See the seed that's coming from the pine? See here? If you can see that properly. Hang on, sorry. So pine trees are symbolic of Lone Pine. The words that instantly come up is the lone bugler. Probably not saying that properly, so apologies. I also want to get another artefact. And there's a few things that actually connect to this. This is a lone pine as well. Pine cone. How incredible is that? From an engineering point of view. You can see how it's germinated. So what I'm interested in is what germinates from lone pine. This is what's left after germination. It's just an empty shell. Not unlike the sub behind me. It's an empty shell. So what is the positive seeds that's coming out of Lone Pine, or if you like, Gallipoli, First World War, the sacrifice made by soldiers, Australian soldiers there. I don't want to particularly glorify the war side because I'm going to give the feminine perspective. We all hear about the war heroes, but anyone that's spoken to a soldier, he's not going to be telling you about the heroism in the sense of the glory of war. He's going to tell you about the carnage and his trauma from it. Because I've spoken with soldiers, and I also had a long-term relationship with one who never shot anyone. He shot over their heads because he could see their mothers and their faces. So I want to go still. I want to go still on Lone Pine. Well, the first thing, I probably will go into the military because I have to go where my inner feeling takes me, and what I saw was innocent boys going to war. They were laughing and happy because they're serving their country. They had friends, camaraderie, sense of purpose, which is why they joined the military in the first place, because they believed they were serving their country, serving their families, serving They're people. So it's come from a very strong sense of the greater whole. So the country we call the nation state, in this case Australia, they felt they were serving their country, Australia. So I'm going to go still again because I want to kind of reach into more deeper aspects of war and beyond war. It's really funny. I get a lot of laughter and jokes. The Australian spirit is it's very much about mateship in actual fact, but not mateship in just, it's in the sense of just sort of a boyishness around it, you know, mucking around. There's an innocence in it is what I feel. And there's an innocence around warfare. Like if we look at this sub behind us, the children are playing on it. You know, it looks like a fun thing to explore. It's a shell of a sub. It's not an actual sub with, you know, technology inside. I've been inside a real sub and I've had a look at the compartments and the technology. It was an older sub. It wasn't a modern sub. I've also been on modern battleships, the big aircraft carriers. I've been on them. So we, the people, tend to, you know, see these things as something curious. We hear a lot of narratives around the unquestioned belief in warfare as defence. And of course, I'm a peace educator, so I'm also looking at a whole range of issues around it in respect of inner and outer peace, violence, non-violence. I'm looking at conflict resolution. I'm looking at and questioning the need for violence in order to attain order. I'm also looking at the industrial military complex, the making of money out of war. So when we create a market, there becomes vested interest in maintaining that market. Then we also have escalation with arming up. One side escalates, the other side escalates. The cost of that, trillions of dollars per year. The opportunity cost of that, where could that money have been spent in respect of preparing for war in many respects? When we prepare for war, are we actually creating an intention for it and then manifesting it in our experience? And of course, the very big issue is the leaders who are in charge. I won't say they're representing the people because I don't believe they are. We've got two-party systems. We've got corporate interests. We have people coming into parties who are chosen, not by the people, but by those interests. We've also got certain personalities who are dominant personalities. They're very strong in the masculine. They don't have a lot of feminine in them, who are leading a whole range of people, not just the military. We've got intelligence, we've got government departments, we've got general media. We've got the whole culture around these narratives that are typically responded to positively because they're seen as defending us. And I want to introduce another perspective coming from another way of seeing, because of the hundreds and thousands and millions that have died in warfare and the millions of families that were affected, and the healing that didn't happen after warfare, because these days it's 90% fatalities are civilian. So those who are impacted by war are the civilians now. It's not two standing armies fighting each other. The populations are actually being put in harm's way, not just the soldiers, but the people, and they've got no defence. We've also got very powerful weaponry. It's also targeting technologies such as phones. And where does that all lead us? You say it leads us to peace. Well, I'm a peacemaker, and is that true, that war leads us to peace? On some level, yes, in that we say never again, lest we forget, because it's so impacting. But it's not, war is not peace, okay? It can lead us to peace because we're reacting against it. We don't want it. So we redouble our efforts, or we learn about human rights because there was so much atrocity. Because once people get into this space of killing, I mean, it's murder. This is not playing cyber games. This is the real deal. And there's no holes barred anymore. The Geneva Conventions are not being observed. And now we've got private industry involved. There is not a lot of accountability going to happen in the future. And then we've got private militias. So there's this can get so out of hand, particularly when it gets privatised. And that seems to me to be the problem. It's not only that, it's also the very strong masculine that's driving leadership. We need that balance, that homeostasis, where it's a little bit like if you've got a husband and wife, and the husband gets really angry about something and the wife calms him down, gets him to see it another way. That's the feminine coming in to create a balance. See, this balance is essential for harmony. Order is really about control and creating fear-based strategies in order to ensure that control is maintained via fear. And what I'm talking about is world peace on the basis of actually learning peace. So that means questioning your thinking. It means problem solving. It means really looking into the fog of war. It's looking at inner discord and how you deal with that. Do you project it out onto someone else and blame them? Or do you look into your own problem, your own issue, your own fears, and deal with the problem of war there? I've often mentioned Byron Katie. She talks about all war should be on paper, and I don't disagree with that. Because if it's all happening in the machinations of the mind, where the mind is seeing an enemy, and if you're taught to not question your thinking, then you're going to maintain a line that tells you that this is true, and anything outside of that is disobedience, is disloyalty, is being a traitor, when in truth we have to question, does it serve us, does it not, in the end? Or do we end up with World War III, where many, many millions of people are killed and the environment irreparably damaged, where we've already got major emergency in respect of nature? So I think the peace narrative has to come into this picture now far more strongly, because we are very good at creating the conflicts, but we're not very good at resolving them, and we're not very good at maintaining peace and sustainability at the same time. And a lot of it's to do with the industrial system, economics, where we've believed our security is tied to material wealth, but the planet is a limit situation in that the planet cannot supply our materialism. And of course, there have been, talk philosophically years ago. Malthus talked about population. There's also definitely been on the table the talk of depopulation. And is that solving the problem? And who gets to choose or play God? Who lives, who doesn't? Do we then create arbitrary lines of compliance, non-compliance? Do we get rid of democracy so that those who like total control don't get questioned, when that questioning is a very important rebalancing levy in order to create harmony, which is actually sustaining our civilization? Or do we go through a mass extinction event? We are at a crossroads without doubt. And I would say to all those involved in all of this, you have to seriously sit back and think about what you're doing. Is it business as usual? Is it we just continue on with the strategies from the past, or do we start to think differently? And I've heard people talk about disruption, thinking differently, cyber warfare, all the rest of it. It's all on the table. As people still keep trying to maintain their material wealth, their status, their power through control of those resources, through influencing government in these endless sort of scenarios of economic growth, which is a misnomer, as we've not factored into GDP or gross national product the environmental collapse, the environmental resource use. So this is just a pause to give this some consideration as I look at the submarine sitting behind me, which is a tourist attraction. And yet if you were at the other end of one of those torpedoes, if one of those torpedoes, let's say it was a live sub, decided to shoot one into Sydney Harbour, what would you do? Would it then be seen as a tourist, or a curiosity? Or would it be seen as something that creates great harm and fear? Whilst I respect and admire the engineering in it, I'd love to see that engineering being used in ways that further humanity, further our civilization. So I want to go into now the alternative way of seeing, because this paradigm that we've been operating in for a very long time is not working. We can see that with the build-up of tensions with the United States, particularly. We're going from one war to the next in a peacetime. We've heard the narratives of terrorism. We've heard the narratives of democracy. We've heard the devising or divisory statements seeing the other as the enemy. In a world where we have to learn how to live together, it's a little bit like living in the one house. You can all be at war with each other, or you can try and work out ways to. The United Nations was supposed to be a venue for all the nations to come together, but then we have tiers within that, Security Council and General Assembly. Still not equal. Then we've got diplomatic efforts, the art of negotiation and bargaining, bullying, sweeteners. This is all not enabling real dialogue in order to solve a problem. We're still angling for power. So moving to this new way of seeing, it's definitely the law of attraction. What you think about, you bring about. So I'll give an example. If you see the red car, let's say you bought a red car, and you see red cars everywhere. Consciousness has a way of focusing on something and then noticing it. It selects it out of its environment and it becomes prevalent. Had you not bought the red car, you would never have seen it. So what we focus on, we create. So if we keep controlling media, controlling narratives through forms of counter-terrorism in order to win the hearts and the minds, without a really deep feeling for the big picture, which is all human souls and animals, life on this planet, really. It's what you have in your hands. If we keep seeing our family as the enemy And it comes down even to the microcosm of the family as well. It's really hard work to make peace because you've got to be able to compromise somewhere. You may even have to say you were wrong. You may even have to apologise. I mean, I've just done that recently. It's not to say the other member doesn't have issues, the other does, but if I'm to make peace, then I've got to lead by example. And they might not be where I'm at in respect of truth. They might not be where I'm at in respect of a desire for peace. They may well just want to win the argument. They may well be stuck in a paradigm where they're going after things that just keep perpetuating the problem. But that's not my business. My business is I have to be the change in that situation. And if I've misunderstood something, I have to acknowledge it. And it's not a sign of weakness. Even if the other thinks that they've won, in reality, it's a sign of strength because I'm able to acknowledge something that may make me appear like I've lost, but personally I've won because I'm staying in alignment with truth, and that's the real winning. When we create glee clubs from an anti-bullying point of view, we create a group where everyone agrees. Now, we could extrapolate that out to the media, pushing out a message of that evil other. When we go into glee clubs, then we start to bully others. We then get others on board as we seek to target that other. This is bullying. Bullying is where A has power over B, but it's done as a repeated negative behaviour. So anything with a violent anything is a form of bullying. And one cannot ask citizens to not bully one another or children to not bully one another unless they're prepared to stop it themselves. I'll give you an example. When Gandhi was alive, and of course Gandhi is well known as the independence leader in India, he was someone who was very in alignment with truth as he saw it, and he saw it as God. He also saw himself as all religions. So he wasn't dividing, he was seeking to unite. Now, one day, a woman came up to Gandhi and said, "My son will not give up sugar. Please, Gandhi, tell him to stop eating sugar. It's going to ruin his teeth." Gandhi said, "I can't, but bring him back in a week's time." She was really perplexed and quite annoyed with him. It's like, surely it's simple. Just tell him to stop that behaviour. You're a person with influence. He will listen to you, would have been her thinking. But Gandhi was principled. She came back in a week's time, and then Gandhi turned to her child and said, "You should give up sugar. It'll rot your teeth. You know, it's not good for you." And then the mother says, "Well, why didn't you just say this a week ago?" Gandhi said, "I hadn't given up sugar." That's where the principled life takes you. In other words, you've got to be the example. You've got to walk the talk. You cannot go out to the world and say we're standing up for democracy if you're dismantling your own. And if there are certain voices that have more sway than others. Truth is not easy because you've got to actually look at your own self. Same applies to warfare. We can get onto nationalist bandwagons. We can frighten people to the point where they believe that defence is necessary. But what if we did the harder work and actually created peace? Because again, that takes far more courage because you've got to look at you, not the other party. And that's where majority of leaders don't want to go, if not all, because they see it as a weakness. They believe they're defenceless. If we disarm, then the other side is going to get the advantage. But what's not understood is the law of attraction, which is energy in motion or emotion. Emotion is not being out of control. Emotion is being in touch with energy in motion. This is what creates our future. So from all thoughts everywhere is what they call fate. And I'll just repeat that again. From all thoughts everywhere is fate. As we think it, we bring about it. Now, you don't need a lot of people to think in a certain way. You just need people who are emotionally in alignment with that thought in order to create what it is you're wanting. We keep thinking about what we don't want. We're so conditioned to fight against. We're so conditioned to push away those things we don't like. We see enemies whenever there's a disagreement or someone coming at a subject matter in a different way that we don't agree with. Democracy would say everyone has a right to an opinion, but we can't use that as lip service and then not action it in our own lives or in our own political parties or in our own families. Democracy should have begun in the family, in actual fact, which it hasn't. We've had authority in the family. And this is what has conditioned our minds. Then we get into trouble. We make up excuses why we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Or we try, because we're scared, we try and make up a lie so that this negative consequence doesn't happen. Rather than teaching truthfulness, having the courage to face your own actions and the consequence of those actions on others. If you've done the wrong thing, going up and apologising. That's what truth and ethical decision-making makes you do. It's not a weakness, it's actually a strength, and it gives permission for others to actually do the same thing. But we all witness each other lying. We witness the media lying. We witness our political leaders lying. We see the spin around things. We see the influences that are co-opting people into activities that may not serve them. How do you find the strength to pull back from participating in activities that go against what you say you believe in? We see bullying on an international level every day. And this is not a mature society that's creating harmony and leading by example. What we've got is still this bullying that's going on. But the thing is with bullying, because it's a negative behaviour, it actually undermines itself. So you can never win with bullying. What goes around comes around is a very wise saying. I often say what you resist persists, what you look at disappears. So the more we resist, the more we fight, the more we create enemies, the more we bring it on. And that's not what people are saying they want. So you have to start to envisage a world that is at peace, that is mature enough to resolve its own conflicts, that doesn't glorify violent behaviours and call that security, and then say to people, don't kill each other in their society. You can't, on the international level, do one thing and then at the national level make that a crime. You know, war crimes tribunals happened. I went to the ecumenical chambers in Cambodia when they were building the courts there to start to look at trying only a few leaders. I think it was only about 5 Cambodian leaders. This was under Pol Pot's regime, which was a totalitarian regime where, you know, millions of people were impacted by Pol Pot's ideology, where he saw the bourgeoisie, the wealthy as, or the intelligent, the educated as a problem. And so they were to be gotten rid of, and the society was to be reduced down to an agrarian type society of workers. Call that the proletariat. So people were exterminated. I went to Tulsalong prison, and I brought this up before in a previous video, but it seems to be top of mind for me at the moment. If anybody goes to my book, A Fool for Peace, you'll see a photo in there where I've got a headband on and I'm thinking deeply about what I'd just seen, which was torture chambers. It was a school that was converted into a torture chamber. So all the enemies of the state. So that internal security apparatus was targeting individuals that it saw as not complying with its edicts. They were seen as traitors. And that's how that enemy type mentality, when distorted and cruel, becomes policy. And many, many innocent people. I mean, I saw the photos of mothers, fathers, children, grandparents who had all been tortured and killed. And then they were taken down to the killing fields. Horrible things happened, you know. I felt the energy of that place, and it was just repugnant, you know. I had to have a shower after because it was still hanging in the air. So I think up to 1 million people were killed in Cambodia. You can look in my books. I've got the statistics in there. And the thing is that what keeps this type of tyrant in power is interference from other countries who are in other battles, who are supporting this one if it's an alliance against another. They don't care about whether this one is actually acting out of totalitarian edicts that they say that they are against. They tend to use what is expedient. The values don't come into it. So he was held up in a way. He was a character that maintained that power because others gave their power away, or other international actors chose to support him on one level or another. It serves them. But ultimately, it doesn't serve anybody. Just looking at the kids. And when we see emerging totalitarianism today, my hope is that this is the last final gasp of a system that is not serving humanity. You know, but it's like, well, how much pain do we need to take in order to wake up to practices that are not lived, that are just preached, and that we get controlled and influenced by these perspectives that are not serving the very people that that's actually funding them, because it's the public through taxation that's funding these violent activities, which we will not allow any critique. That in itself is a totalitarian barrier, because we don't want to look at it. We don't want a whole negative array to come against our plans, because we've invested a lot of money. There's a lot of influence involved here. But the thing is, if this ends up creating the end of humankind, well, surely it's a duty of citizens to speak up if they think there's great danger ahead. And I certainly do. So from a peacemaker perspective, what I would advise, look at Jane Elliott's work, look at discrimination and how you're seeing the other and how you're demonising them through the narrative you're creating in order to influence events to turn out your way. It's a zero-sum game from my perspective, because what you resist persists. In other words, it's going to come back. It'll come back. It's the way it works. I'm talking energetically. This is not an ideology. I'm just talking about how energy works. What you put out comes back. Inquiry is another very, very important tool in a peacemaker's kit. So Byron Katie, she's the key. That is to question your thinking. Is it true what I believe? This is the fog of war. This is how you get rid of the fog of war. This is groupthink that happens in higher levels. Is it true that we need to do this action? Can I be absolutely sure that it's true? How do I feel? How do I react when I believe the thought? Who would I be without the thought? then you turn it around to the opposite, the other, and to the self. This is called inquiry. This is something you do alone. You don't have to do it in a group. You can also bring in 6 thinking hats. This is Edward de Bono. It's called parallel thinking. So the facts hat would be the white hat. The critical hat would be the black hat. The optimistic hat would be the yellow hat. And so on and so forth. This is a form of lateral thinking. Role play is another good one, when you pretend you're the other party. But you're not doing it to try and have an advantage. You're doing it to try and stand in their shoes. So in conflict resolution, in building empathy, which enables an expanded intelligence perspective, you stand in the shoes of the other. Imagine if I was that other party. And I don't believe in higher levels they're doing that at all. Now, the other one, of course, is the law of attraction. What you think about, you bring about. What are we putting out into the ether, and is it going to serve us? Are we creating that enemy? If we are, then you're not going to be creating peace because you're creating an enemy. It's quite literally the case. If you want peace, you have to live it. The way I do peace is I don't see anyone as an enemy. I see them as a teacher. So I reframe it. What am I learning from this other who's challenging me? And believe me, I've had a lot of challenges. I'm a peacemaker for a reason. This is not idealism. It's come from hard experience. But where I'm particularly fortunate is I have a very loving feeling towards everyone. I always have had since I was a child. So I have that. So I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm never seeking to harm anyone. So what I do is I may feel my feelings. I might get what I call sort of evoked or triggered. Emotionally, we get triggered. That's when we get angry. We're getting a trigger happening. Now, and this is not a trigger on a gun. This is an emotional trigger which causes you to pull the trigger on a gun. Now, that trigger means something in you is not healed, and what that means, you're out of alignment with truth because you're feeling negative. All negativity is nature's way of showing you you're out of alignment with what is natural and healthy. This is not any sort of new age narrative. This is true, and I know it's true because I've really been looking at peace for a long time now, over 20 years. What I've come to understand is that internally within every human being is a natural equilibrium. When we're at peace, we're not in a controlled or contrived peace where I just say nothing even though you annoy me. The real peace is I can sit with you when you are saying things that would have normally annoyed me and no longer feel annoyance. That's when you know you've healed a misunderstanding on a higher level. Now, whilst you're being triggered, this teacher is coming to trigger you. They're actually helpful. If you're self-aware enough, you'll recognize the purpose of it, which is to help you grow. And something better is waiting for you down the track. Because, life is a decision tree. You think about it, it's actually a multi-dimensional decision tree. However you choose to respond or react to something is going to lead you down a trajectory. Now, in the world at the moment, we're heading down the trajectory of the mass extinction event. That's where we're going. It's very evident. You can see how the leaders have aligned. Now, I don't blame anybody. I see the world population also falling into line with fear and believing that the narratives that they're getting in the media because they haven't been taught critical thinking. I don't blame them either, but I can see that they are also supporting narratives that don't serve them because they don't know. But they don't know that they don't know. And that's the nature of ignorance. And the ignorance was by design in order to negate the power of the public, which doesn't serve those in authority in actual fact, because if you suppress the voices of those who are telling you, it's a little bit like the emperor with no clothes. Those voices that are coming to you that you might get extremely triggered about, And I know in certain political circles, people on that far spectrum are getting very angry with voices that they consider to be activists. What I'm here to tell you as someone who's not aligned with anyone, that those activists are here to teach you something about yourself because you're being triggered. If you weren't being triggered, I'd say they've got nothing to teach you. And vice versa. If they're being triggered by you, then you have come to teach them something. So it's certainly a two-way street. It's not a one-way street at all. From my perspective, it's teaching us democracy. From your perspective, it's teaching you democracy. It's actually a mirror. I'm seeing the mirror right now. So there's no mistakes in this equalizing energetic array in which we live. So the law of attraction is about what you focus on, you create, because our world is energetic, our thoughts are electromagnetic. Positive thinking gurus in the business area were not successful for no reason. They were successful because they were teaching positive thinking, and people then could see their goals materialize. That's an energetic focus. You get passionate. You go for it. You don't give up. This is how energy transmutes into a physical manifestation. So that's another tool in the Peacemaker's Toolkit, is what are we thinking about and being mindful of it? Is the narrative going to create the very thing we don't want, which is a complete collapse of the economic structure? And it will. War does not boost economics, only boosts the industrial military complex. But even that becomes undermined if the whole community is destroyed, because there's going to be no taxes in which to pay for that. So the sum of the parts is the whole, and what you do to another returns to the self is also a peace wisdom. So you can't just sit there as islands of automation and believe you can control the whole play. You can't, because you're all connected. But because you're operating in silos and you're in groupthink with those of like mind, you typically can't see outside that box. And that's what the problem is. It's like selective perception. When I go still, I seek to go into a holistic perspective so I can feel it out. And because I'm coming from an intention of peace, I'm not coming from an intention of anti-anything, even though my statements might challenge some who really believe they're right and who have a negative narrative going on that says, oh, that could be dangerous, because that's the way they've strategically been taught to think. You're going to keep reacting in the same pattern because that's what you're taught. But what I'm here to do is to challenge that pattern for the highest good of all, including you. Peace is a natural order. It's not an idealistic notion that's impossible to achieve. I'm in peace right now. I can tell you it's very easy. Peace is very easy once you understand how it works. And it is about healing what is erroneous within our thought patterns that doesn't serve us, that keeps us in these endless war games that we think are somehow benefiting us by keeping the other frightened so that we can stay in dominance over another. The truth is it's a zero-sum game. There's no winners. And because the technology is getting more and more powerful and everyone keeps reacting and their whole focus is on strategically working counter-terrorism, each party sees the other as the terrorist. They don't have a holistic vision that what they're seeing in the other is in themselves. Because whenever you accuse another party of something, unless it's a factual statement, it's typically seeing yourself through that other. So in other words, if I sit and judge someone and I go, she's really jealous, and let's just say it's me that's jealous, but I'm in denial of it, I will say, no, I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous. She's jealous of me. This girl said nothing, but I'm projecting like onto her and saying it is true. And because I'm unconscious, I'm not self-aware, I'm not seeking truth, I will believe that, and then I might add to it at some point and create a bigger story around it. And then I'll tell others and they'll believe it. She'll become demonized. She'll become isolated. And that's how we win. But we lose in that respect. We lose. We lose ourselves. We've created an injustice against someone and there's a ramification. Who knows where that girl goes, but whatever happens as a result of that demonization, directly we've been linked to whatever comes out of it for the girl. We become diminished because we know we lied. So we actually lose self-love because we lied and we know it. Powerlessness comes from lack of self-love. That comes back to our childhood, where we've had conditional love projected onto us. You do the right thing, we'll accept you. You speak in the words that I agree with, I will like you. You look like me, you're like me, the other is not like me, let's create a division. That's how it plays out. The challenge with peace is you are me. You learn actually in the peace narrative that you are me. So I can see myself in you. If I'm seeing anything wrong with you, it's in me, because I wouldn't be able to see it if it wasn't in me. And that's what truth brings you to. You go, oh, okay, I'm seeing in you what's in me. And it's really hard to bring yourself back from that lie because you really feel you want to make them wrong. And then a vortex creates around that. Everyone jumps on board and an injustice happens. That's how we create powerlessness, which is the spiral that goes down because it's negative. Others get on board, more injustices occur, then they get justified. We had to do it. You know, unfortunately, it's, I remember Scott Ritter talking like this at the University of Melbourne. Unfortunately, war, you have to go to war, he thought. He said it's ugly, it's brutal, it's terrible, it's disgusting, but it's necessary, he felt, because he hadn't sufficiently questioned his thinking. He'd been trained to think that way. And he has to think that way because if he's to really bring to himself the truth of the matter, that it is necessary, how does he deal with the guilt he might then feel having killed many people? See, this is the part this is why denial comes in, because you cannot bear the pain of it. But until you're willing to face the pain of it, you'll continue to project your pain elsewhere. And that's how it really works. This is the truth of the matter. I myself have gone through situations of wanting to end my life many times because of situations of powerlessness that came through teachers that came to me. And I had to really deeply probe for truth. I had to, if I was to live. And I had to try and rebalance in my own mind to be fair to the other parties. Because it's so easy to get on the bandwagon. But I don't want to do that because my personal goal is to become a better person, is to be a peacemaker. And how would that be possible if I was to harm others? I couldn't. It's not possible. Because they are me. And the minute I say that, then the animosity dissolves because they are me. I could do what they're doing if I was in their shoes. If I knew nothing else. This is what brings in compassion. See, understanding is one of the keys to all of this. It's another peacemaker tool. You've got to understand the other party. Now, this doesn't mean gaining intelligence. Scott Ritter said, you've got to know your enemy, but I don't have an enemy. I'd agree with him only in as far as you need to understand that other that appears different. Because the more you go into the real intelligence of understanding them, then you're going to see they're just like you if you're honest. It de-escalates the conflict immediately. then those weapons come down from DEFCON 3, where you're just about to launch your nuclear weapon, when you recognise they are the mirror of me. The very totalitarianism I see in that other party is in me. The very fear, all the criticisms that I've levelled at them is actually me. And that can be hard to take, because you've got to then, this great image you've had of who you are gets levelled, because we're all equal, including that other party's equal. And even if that other party is in the delusion of totalitarianism as well, as you shift, the world shifts energetically. That's the trick with this. It's not a vulnerability to come into wisdom around a problem. It's actually your true security, because you will de-escalate the problem. So I'm going to finish up, because this has been a long narrative, but I've kind of felt strongly to bring in the peace narrative, because I'm sitting here at Holbrook and the subs behind me. As I said, I was taken to a shrine of legacy. It's to do with the war widows, where I actually pulled this off the tree, which is the original lone pine. This is the seed that came from the tree in Turkey at Gallipoli. And I'm going to hold this with great love for the soldiers that went there. And I do care about them, so don't think for a moment I don't. I do. I feel it would have been terrifying for them. And other interests put them in front. And that's what we keep doing. We keep putting others in front as cannon fodder to win the war. There's no winning in war. War in itself is a war against yourself, because you're not willing to look at you. All wars are coming from within. They're not coming from without. And that's really the revelation in the peace area. Know thyself, I would be etching onto every military vehicle. Know thyself. Not a woman's name. I wouldn't be painting that on the side of a plane. Know thyself is the greatest national security. And be honest about it, and look at business interests and how they're fueling and benefiting from misery. That is not what civilization wants. I just want to show again this pine as I'm coming to a conclusion here. So those seeds that I'm spreading today are coming from the lone pine. All my videos are those pods that have been ejected from this lone pine. The pine cone is the holder of the seeds. And when we speak up in truth to those we love, which is, for me, all sides, then we release. This opens up. These pods go out into the world, and those who have the awareness to really hear me will hear this. Those who don't will just dismiss it and say, it's idealism. It's not. And that's okay too. You know, I do respect everyone, and we, you know, you could have told me this stuff 10 years ago and I wouldn't have believed it. There's certainly been CIA agents who are coming out and whistleblowing who didn't believe things even 5 years ago and have changed because they're starting to understand. So we don't really become aware before our time, and it doesn't mean you're less than me if you don't get this, or I'm better than you because I do. I believe we're all on journeys, we're all on trajectories, we're all equal. We all have equal wisdom. I'm not holier than thou. I'm just prepared to speak up because there's things I'm knowing now that I believe can serve you. That's why I'm speaking. It's coming from great love of people, actually. So I'm going to leave it there, live from Holbrook in New South Wales, Australia. May you find peace, because until you do, we continue on the trajectory of the mass extinction event. When you find peace, you're going to turn it around. And it doesn't come with depopulation. It comes with wisdom. Because when you start to see through wisdom, you'll see you don't need to do those things that you're considering. We're much more than we know. So with that, I send you love and peace. Thanks for watching and take care of yourself. Bye.